Let's start with a comforting lie most of us carry around. I knew better. I just chose badly. It feels right. It preserves dignity. It lets us believe that somewhere inside us is a rational captain steering the ship, occasionally making errors, but fundamentally in control. Now, let's gently, methodically, and mercilessly dismantle that idea. Because if you zoom in close enough, not metaphorically, but biologically, there is no moment where you step outside the machinery and freely choose. There is only a cascade of causes stacked on top of causes going back seconds, minutes, years, decades, and in some cases, millennia. And once you see that clearly, the question stops being, why did I do that? And becomes, how could I have done anything else? The millisecond before you act, let's begin with the last possible place where free will could hide. The instant before you act, you snap at someone you love. You eat the thing you promised yourself you wouldn't. You send the text you know you'll regret. In that final moment, what's happening? Neurons are firing. Electrical impulses travel across synapses. Neurotransmitters bind to receptors. Certain neural circuits win a competition against others. That's it. No ghost in the machine. No executive self hovering above the brain issuing commands. If we put electrodes in the right places, and we've done this, we can often predict your decision before you are consciously aware of having made it. This is not philosophy. This is not speculation. This is what brains do. Your frontal cortex, the region most associated with impulse control and long-term planning, is trying to exert influence. Meanwhile, deeper, older brain structures, the amygdala, the nucleus, accumbens, the hypothalamus, are screaming things like now, danger, reward, and whichever system has the stronger signal in that moment wins. So the first uncomfortable truth is this: at the moment of action, there is no freedom, only neurobiology. Why was your frontal cortex losing that day? Now we take a step backward in time. Why did the rational part of your brain lose the argument? Maybe you were tired. Sleep deprivation weakens frontal cortical function. After enough sleep loss, your brain starts resembling that of someone mildly intoxicated. Maybe you were stressed. Chronic stress floods the brain with glucocorticoids, which impair working memory, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Stress doesn't just make you feel bad, it biologically sabotages restraint. Maybe you were hungry. Judges, of all people, grant fewer paroles right before lunch. Same facts, same laws, different blood glucose levels. Already we're seeing something disturbing. Your bad decision may have had less to do with morality or character than with how much sleep you got and when you last ate. Minutes to hours earlier, hormones run the show. Step back further. Hormones are not background noise, they are instruction. Testosterone doesn't create aggression out of nothing, but it amplifies behaviors that maintain status. Cortisol sharpens fear and narrows attention. Dopamine doesn't signal pleasure. It signals anticipation, pushing you toward the thing you might regret 5 minutes later. If your hormonal environment is tilted just slightly in one direction, your probability of making certain decisions shifts dramatically. Importantly, you don't feel hormones operating. You feel certainty, desire, justification. The brain is very good at inventing reasons after the fact. Days to weeks earlier, learning, conditioning, and habits. Now we zoom out more. Your brain is a prediction machine. It is constantly updating itself based on past outcomes. Every time a behavior is followed by reward, relief, pleasure, approval, neural pathways strengthen. This is not a metaphor. Synapses literally change shape. Receptors increase or decrease in number. Certain circuits become more likely to activate again. That bad decision you made today might be the result of 10,000 earlier reinforcements you barely remember. By adulthood, much of your behavior is automatic, not because you're lazy, but because your brain is efficient. It runs on patterns. Habits are not failures of willpower. They are triumphs of neuroconsistency. Childhood, where the real damage or luck happens if you want to understand someone's worst decisions, don't ask what kind of person they are. Ask what kind of childhood they had. Early life stress, poverty, neglect, violence, instability changes brain development. It alters the size and reactivity of the amygdala. It affects how the frontal cortex matures. It reshapes stress hormone systems permanently. Children exposed to chronic adversity grow into adults whose brains are tuned for threat rather than deliberation. When those individuals later make impulsive, short-sighted, or destructive choices, society calls it irresponsibility. Biology calls it predictable. Culture and environment, the invisible hand, now zoom out further. Your culture determines which behaviors are rewarded, punished, admired, or ignored. It shapes what feels normal, what feels shameful, and what feels inevitable. Brains are exquisitely sensitive to social context. Change the group, and you change the behavior. This is why people do things in crowds they would never do alone, why war turns ordinary humans into killers, why status hierarchies magnify cruelty. No one wakes up wanting to become a villain. They wake up embedded in systems that make certain behaviors easier, safer, or more rewarded than others. Genes, the oldest influence and the most misunderstood. Genes do not cause behaviors. Genes influence sensitivities. They affect how reactive your stress system is, how efficiently you metabolize neurotransmitters, how plastic your brain is to experience. A gene variant may increase your vulnerability to addiction, but only in certain environments. Another may heighten impulsivity, but only under stress. Genes load the gun. Environment pulls the trigger, and culture decides where the target is. So where was you in all of this? Here's the hard part. At no point in this chain did a free-floating, uncaused self step in and say, I shall now choose independently of biology and history. There was only causation, complex causation, distributed causation, layers upon layers of influence, but causation nonetheless. This does not mean your life is meaningless. It does not mean behavior can't change. It does not mean we should give up on responsibility. It means we need to redefine responsibility. Why this is not a depressing conclusion, people often fear that if free will is an illusion, then morality collapses. The opposite is true. If behavior is biologically shaped, then cruelty, addiction, violence, and failure are problems to solve, not sins to punish. It shifts our focus from blame to prevention, from retribution to rehabilitation, from moral outrage to understanding. It replaces the question, what's wrong with you, with what happened to you, and that is a far more humane starting point. The final uncomfortable truth, you didn't make that bad decision because you're weak. You made it because at that moment, given your brain, your body, your history, your environment, and your biology, you could not have done otherwise. The real challenge isn't accepting this intellectually. The real challenge is deciding what kind of society we want to build once we truly believe it.